Hello, everybody. My voice might not be the best. I'm a little bit sick. But I wanted to make this video after the last episode was revealed. This will be all about the reboot, of course. First of all, if you haven't seen episode 9 yet, then you might want to do that first. After all, this video will contain spoilers of this episode. So the reboot is something that has been in my mind for a while. And honestly, had it not been for all the positive feedback, I might not have even gone through with it. I was honestly afraid the majority was gonna be against it. But it turned out very few were either unsure or not for it, while the majority was completely for it. With all the positive feedback, I decided that it was time for the reboot to take place. It first began with the motivation that was kind of fading and everything was just going slow. I began to realize something was wrong. I wasn't all that happy nor that excited to work on AzureHowl, and I had trouble motivating myself to get to it. I kept getting ideas I couldn't work in the story without causing more problems to it. And then one day I told myself, what if I would reboot it? Do something different for the whole thing. So this is where we dive into the world of AzureHowl. I promised in my other video about the reboot that I would explain more clearly why exactly I want to reboot it in the first place. The biggest problem the series faces is simply the time in which it was made and how I aged in comparison to when I started. When I was a kid, I just began AzureHowl. I didn't think for 1 second. I just was like, I'm going to make episode 1, and that's exactly what happened. I just made the episode and I was just done with it. Now, of course, I'm dealing with plenty of problems, and in order to solve those, I had to add in other things, which could have in return made even more problems. Equally, for some reason as a kid, I made the most complex situations in contrast to much easier solutions being available. I made and created too many secrets, leaving people to believe it were plot holes rather than secrets. And some characters definitely could have been far more interesting had I put in some more time. But hey, I was young, and when you're young, things will just slip your mind pretty easily. So let's talk about complex reasonings. In episode 9, it's finally revealed that Kaito and Ruza are related. Believe it or not, but this is the secret I wish I never made. That might sound odd, but it really is. When I showed that Kaito cared for Ruza, people began to, ship them. And I was like, wait, what is going on? No, what are you doing? Don't ship them. But I couldn't tell people not to do so because it was a secret. So I was conflicted with, I wanted people to know, but I couldn't tell them yet. So very obviously, maybe, I began to give details or show artworks to try and push the idea of them being related more. So in hopes that people would figure it out. On DeviantArt, the amount of times I made Kaito with the moon on the background, or even a crescent moon to refer to Luna. I drew both Kaito and Ruza together, even added them on the same age chart together, or drew them as pups together. I mean, come on, even on the side, his birthday stated the 1st of April. I also had the tradition to draw a birthday art piece on my birthday, and while I drew Ruza for the first time, I drew Kaito the very next time, and on my last birthday piece that I made, I just drew them together. I basically was doing everything in my power to get rid of this secret, and while some began to feel suspicious and even believe it, rightfully so, not everybody was convinced, as there were still quite some people that either didn't believe it or, still shipped them. Anyhow, for those who still wonder how they are related, hold on, this is where I made things more complex than I should have. So, their parents are Lokin and Luna. Lokin is a cosmic wolf. Luna, as revealed in episode 4, is an elemental cosmic wolf, meaning her trait from her species is to be born a random element, and then to give birth to a random element. But because her mate was Lokin, a non-elemental species wolf, that's a long sentence, the trait of her kind went lost in her children. However, her trait worked, meaning her kids would have a different element, and they became shadow. Now both are color mutated, and both are in actuality shadow wolves. Not hybrids. I mean, in a way they are, but for people who follow the site and DeviantArt, they know you have full-blood hybrids, which means wolves that are born rather than a hybrid as the purity of their element. So neither of them have the traits that Luna's kind did, because Lokin isn't part of this species. And because of this, both Kaito and Ruza are not, for example, part elemental of the species, but instead they are actually just pure blood shadow wolves. But that's how they are related, and that's what I all did to ensure it was a secret. As a kid, I first thought it would be fun to have this as a secret, and the elemental species, their existence, is only so for this to work. I made a species to make sure this would be a secret. One that I ended up regretting straight away. Or let's say after episode 5, I believe. To give a simple version, if Luna had just had a shadow wolf as a mate, having full shadow pups would be perfectly possible and more likely than hybrids, since the dragons do play a part in this, and an element naturally weaker than the other will play a big part in the odds of a hybrid existing. But I definitely took a much longer road to all of this. Species especially had this problem as well. Originally, there should have only been one fire and one plant type, but I accidentally designed characters like Cobra and Set, yes, those two are guilty, beforehand, and completely ignored for some reason that they looked nothing like their kind. So 2 new species existed. That's when you're a kid, okay? You just are super impulsive, I guess. Even on original art, they are simply labeled Fire 2, Plant 2, not Magma nor Forester. Other problems I caused as well are specific errors, I would say. I first had an aging system close to mankind. Then I changed it to wolves when I finally talked about their ages in the episode. And then I realized because I changed it closer to wolves, or well, completely close to wolves, that none of their pasts would even work anymore. I mean, how could some of the wolves, like let's pick Kaito, he spent several years in a slave camp. How could he be so traumatized if with the old system he would have been stuck there for like a year? I mean, sure, a lot can happen in 1 year, but all the stuff that has to happen would have been a bit extreme in 1 year. Also for the pups to be separated from their parents. And I mean, just take, for instance, the ghost pups. All of them would already be adults if this system was still there. And then, well, it wouldn't exactly make sense to call them ghost pups, I guess. So in the end, I changed the system back again. But it annoyed me so badly that in the episode, of course, there was spoken of the old system age-wise. And then in the other episode that came, like later episodes, it was changed, of course, to what the system was supposed to be. So if you don't check the info on the site, or you read a lot on DeviantArt, you might be really confused when you're actually watching the episodes for the first time. I also want to talk about characters. One of my biggest regrets was that Matt and Kala, for example, showed very little signs about the death of their children in episode 1. I was young back then, and I might have rushed it, but yes, this storyline of them losing their kids was since the very first episode planned. And I feel like their characters could have been so much more interesting, as originally Matt was suffering the most and dealing with it worse than Kala was. Kala was a strong one for both of them mentally in that sense. But sadly, this was not shown off a bit. Even now, despite them being in the most episodes, some characters are far more loved or liked than them. I feel if I worked a bit better on their characters, that they would have definitely gotten more love. Ruza also suffers from this in the first episodes. It wasn't until episode 7, I believe, that people suddenly had a great fondness for Ruza. I mean, obviously, before this, she was a main character, so she was gonna get some love, one way or another. But heck, when Mud was around and a poll was made, they were equally loved as much almost. While in contrast, of course, to Ruza appearing the whole time, Mud was barely there and so little is known about him even now. So it's kind of at this point surprising that Mud got so much love. Now, Ruza came off as a bit bland, or how to say it, I'm not quite sure. She showed little personality in the first episodes, and this is a shame, since I had planned scenes in those past episodes that I never did. Ruza, as people who follow me on DeviantArt would know that she actually loves water and fish, but not one episode showed this. Ruza originally has the same issues as her brother. She often has nightmares, or she was supposed to have nightmares, and this would be why she would sleep close to her parents or friends. But not in one episode was this showed off. Ruza also struggles finding her element, and not one of the episodes showed this either, or at least here's her complaint about this. Now, all the confusion about her eyes. For some reason, I made her control it. Well, believe it or not, if I continued this line and made the next episode, I would have actually taken that ability away from her, and I would not allow her to control it, because she was originally not supposed to, but I'm not sure anymore why exactly I changed this. Ruza is definitely a character I want to do better. Only in episode 7 did people really feel attached to her and call her even sassy. I legit back then had no clue what sassy fully meant. I mean, I had somewhat of a clue, but I remember Googling it and being like, oh, so that's what they call her. So despite the fact that she had so much screen time, just so little was going on about her, and I feel like a lot of things would have been more interesting, especially for Ruza, if you would have known her personality a bit better rather than, well, a few episodes in. At the same time, Mutt gained so much love, and the question is, what exactly do you know about him? I swear, there is so little known about him, yet so many people like him. I guess it's just his little tiny way of showing humor at times. Now, let's speak about Matt. Despite him being around all these episodes, there is so little you actually know about him. Ruza is aware he still has parents, but she never questions him about anything. I mean, Ruza, come on, be a better friend. First you wake the poor lad up, but you don't even bother to ask questions? Same can be said for Kala and Matt. They never really wanted to know more about him, nor again question him about anything. And I guess it would have made more sense if Matt would have at least been like, so, kid, what you doing here? If I may ask, like, don't you have a family? And stuff like that. So it's kind of funny to see how loved Matt is, despite that so little is known about him. Kala and Matt also fail a bit on the department of good parents. I made a law in the series that pups wouldn't be allowed for training until much older. Not sure why I made this law. Well, why would Kala and Matt follow this if their kids were slaughtered? It would make more sense that they do train Ruza. Not only that, they tell or explain so little things that other characters have to explain, making, well, them seem like pretty bad parents when it comes to teaching stuff. Other than all of that, the species in AzureHowl are also dealing with a rather outdated issue. As I grew, I had more ideas, or rather plans, for how I rather had them look like. And back then, when I was a kid, I legit made all of those species in perhaps an hour, maybe. Take it, I was even younger back then. I mean, this was before 2009, for crying out loud. And, well, as a kid, when you draw something and you made it, I mean, you're like this little proud child that is like, yes, this is great, and that's just what I'm gonna use. You don't redraw the species over and over again. You just make a species, or you just draw something, and that's what you're gonna use as a kid. But now, with the reboot, I have the option to work on the species, draw some concepts, and I saw that some people even enjoyed the concepts that I had showed already. On Patreon as well, people have been really fond of some of the concepts, and that makes me truly happy. But now with a reboot, I also have the opportunity to work with other artists and allow some other artists to bring in ideas for other species. This way there will be species that aren't only designed by myself. And this brings in a much more interesting variety in the species. Because if you have to design everything yourself, you're always going to end up being unsure, maybe doing something repetitive. But if you have other artists that are inside in all of this, it brings some very interesting species. And believe me, some of the species so far that have been chosen to replace other species, they have given me so many ideas just by looking at the design, and that is so much fun. So it's really fun to be working with other artists as well, to bring something from them in the series. And this way the species will just be really fun. I can also work details out, such as colors that they can have and that they can't have, include gender differences. These are things I can really work on now, but I mean, gender differences for AzureHowl were introduced much later, and I never really had a chart color-wise. And then when I made them, I felt like I had to rush a bit with this, and it was just a bit complex, so to speak. but now I can really make it as clear as I will potentially can. Now, another point I would like to mention is character focus. I'm gonna have to learn to focus on some characters more than others, instead of giving the label of main character when they appear less. I mean, Takaya, for instance, joined in episode 6, but she's been hiding almost the majority of the time after that. Sorry, Takaya, I didn't mean to do that to you. Other than that, I'm also gonna look at the roles some have. For instance, I have to settle on not having 6 leaders of that and 6 leaders of something else. I had this habit because I was like the kid that was really like, equality. Yeah, I wanted there to be a huge equality thing with males and females. This is why you have usually 3 male leaders and 3 female leaders, both in the shadow clans and the dark cities. So I do like that. I do like that I did that, I guess. I'm glad I was seeing everything in a bit of a equal way. But yeah, okay, we're getting away from this point. So back to it. I'm gonna re-look at the roles and the ranks that some of the wolves have. For example, even for the pack, or otherwise known as the ghost pups, that are led by Cain, it doesn't fully make sense. Micaiah is a sweetheart, but she should not be a healer. She is no fighter, and the pack of wolves will need a wolf that can stand his or her ground and could potentially fight. But she would not make a good commander because sure, she can be motherly a bit, but nowhere near commanding. She is also not the type to really stand up all the time for herself, so she definitely would lack heavily in the department of being a good commander. Equally, Kaito, or little pepper boy here, doesn't make a good commander either, as in his role right now. Commander, why am I saying commander the whole time? Technically, they're all referring to each other as leaders, except that Cain is like the leader. Yeah, confusing. But Kaito has a very high position right now in the pack, and it actually just, when I think about it, it just doesn't make sense. He doesn't follow the rules at all, so I'm not sure why I made him one. I remember the reasoning behind it was that Cain kind of wanted Kaito to accept him or think about him in a better way than he does right now, since Kaito doesn't like Cain all that much. But it's not a reason to give Kaito such a high position, to which he could, of course, abuse it all the time. Even on the side, it's mentioned that the other Shadow Wolves are loyal to Kaito more so than Cain. So in that sense, it would make more sense, I guess, if he was a group leader within the pack. Only to his kind, of course. Of course, Cain should just be the main lead, because that's kind of what he's doing right now. He has the final say. So what you could potentially expect, Cain and Sanoke would be a lead pair, since they're mates, which made Sanoke a leader as in default, meaning she gained her status because of Cain. And on the other side, Kaireni and Seth would make great commanders, while Kaito, for instance, would make a great group leader within the pack for his kind. Since for those who follow on DeviantArt, and for those who don't, the packs or the species that are grouped inside of the pack of Cain are led by one lead wolf, so to speak. So meaning there is one Earth Wolf that will keep an eye on all the Earth Wolves, and it would make more sense that Kaito has this position over the Shadow Wolves, since they already treasure him right now. And the Shadow Clans, for example, they're also facing this confusion. They're either being called leaders and then suddenly commanders, and this just has to change as well. Boss and Aquila obviously are leaders. Boss more so than Aquila, which is clearly shown in the episodes, as he's always higher up. Yeah, Boss is not liking to share. Okay, no, stop about Boss. But for the rest, the other leaders, for example, they could for sure be seen as commanders. But some commanders could definitely have higher functions. Reika, for example, would have a very high function because she controls all of the hero clans. So that's a bit different in contrast to other wolves. Age-wise, I also want to reconsider specific ages, because I have no clue how I did not know this until years later. But both Kala and Luna, when I checked their ages, they kinda ended up as teen parents, meaning they got children when they were underaged. I don't know how I did not see this. which, well, Matt would definitely not have lived if that was the case and Krypton found out. Yeah, Matt, you would have been a dead boy. Information-wise, I also want more info to be actually in the episodes versus on the side. I mean, of course, the side is always going to have a bigger summary, since you can't just have one species appear and this random dude explaining every detail of this species. But in fact, if you read the side, you'll likely know a whole lot more about the characters and the wolves in contrast to the episodes. And it would be nice if information about the characters would be more so seen on the episodes and then would be available on the site. But a lot of information is given off screen, and while I did kind of go with the idea of, well, wolves wouldn't talk over things they already know, I'm just gonna have to deal with it, that it's gonna be easier for people to understand if I do explain something here and then. Okay, so other things I have planned but never showed was, for example, in the last episode you saw this mysterious dragon. This one was actually originally planned to show in a dream of Ruza before, a long time ago, and this never happened. With that said, Ruza and Kaito share a lot of things in common with one another as well, but sadly Ruza just featured so little of these. Their biggest difference, in all honesty, was that Ruza was more of a slow learner and Kaito was pretty gifted. Ruza, for example, just was supposed to struggle a lot with her element, but this was not exactly shown, since Ruza legit until this episode has not been able to use her element because, well, she's a shadow wolf and she didn't realize this. And a wolf that doesn't understand what species he is cannot connect with his element. For instance, if a water wolf wants to learn water, they jump into the water. If a shadow wolf wants to learn water, they're gonna be up when it's really dark in the night to first practice this for the first time. But Ruza just did not know with what she had to connect. Her father could say, well, I had to connect with nature. Kala would have to say, I have to connect with fire, but Ruza just didn't know, so she was struggling with this. But this was sadly just never really mentioned. I can also confirm that, as you have seen, she has blue flames. This is not her shadow element, obviously. This would, in fact, also make Ruza the first wolf to actually have more than one element. Now, about Ruza's transformation. That was personally my all-time favorite moment. I have been wanting to do this since I was a kid. I have old art about this and several concepts of how she would look. And you can definitely maybe imagine now how glad I am that I can finally show this. I remember wanting to commission people so badly. So when I did commission people, I just went to complete strangers and asked for private commissions, just to keep her a secret and to ensure I could at least see somebody draw her for once. For the change of her design, since people have been asking about this in the Discord, will her design go from a regular design to this design in the reboot, or will she keep this design? I will confirm that she will keep the new design she achieved in this last episode. For one other specific reason, originally I have no clue why she actually altered marking-wise. It's true that through the scene you saw with the dragon aided her to understand or to find her element. But I don't remember why I made it possible for her markings to change. I know that eventually, with some other things that I'm not gonna explain right now, this would have clashed. And because of this clashing that I was creating for future things, I made a system that would be called a hidden mark, or something that would appear if the wolf would come in touch with a lot of energy, but I felt this was really vague. So obviously, as much as I did enjoy this scene, Ruza is going to start off with these markings. This is just gonna solve so much more about what I have in store for her and planned. So having her start in this design is just gonna make those things that I have planned for her a lot more simple. Or, well, simple. Make more sense, I would rather say. So, with that said, you can expect for the reboot that Ruza will no longer be starting as a fully white wolf with just eye marks. She will take this look. And we'll have to say goodbye to our white cotton ball of fur. Another point, or that I really at least dislike, is the fact that I had to make so many reasons to make other reasons valid. This happened a lot because I merged the old storyboard with new storyboard and alterations of the story. I know that a story will always have a flaw somewhere. Nobody's perfect, and that's not my problem. Since some people were like, well, it has worked till now, so why would you just restart for these things? But the thing is, I had to make so many reasons for so many aspects that it became chaotic almost. I really want to be done with that most of all. For instance, we have the Azure Dragons. Heck, the male has almost no purpose. I'm not sure what he's doing there. I know that in the Discord some people believe that Kaito might have been potentially blessed by the male, but this is not the case. The male is just there. The male just has no purpose. I guess the only purpose he originally had was to ensure that the female would have eggs. But I mean, there are so many other options I could have gone for to ensure she would have children without necessarily needing him. To give you, for example, as well a little insight to how it actually ended up with 2 dragons. Believe it or not, there originally were not 2 dragons. I remember wanting to use these Chinese constellation for the name Seryu, but I wrote it down wrong and added Seiru, which is the female dragon now. And when I realized I wrote it down wrong, I decided it needed a male with the right name. I don't know how my kid self was thinking, okay? I don't know why I did that. But that's how 2 dragons existed, and that's what I decided to work with. But for the reboot, I will have to say that likely the male Azure Dragon is not gonna be there anymore. There is just no purpose for him other than eggs, and this can be easily worked around. Because I've already plans in store for all of this, so the male is likely gonna be gone. I also hope to work with more reliable voice actors for the series. Now, granted, there were amazing people that stuck around from the start. They did auditions to the end, and those people are amazing. I would applaud them, give them 5 stars. They are amazing people. But I'm pretty sure a lot of you are also aware how many times characters ended up changing, and how this was just, for me personally, very chaotic. Often I had to wait months from specific voice actors before I got a reply, or I had to deal with voice actors that just plainly disappeared and never answered again. I mean, if you're gonna stop, at least say, hey, I'm gonna stop. I mean, sure, I'm not gonna be all that happy, but at least you're telling me. But I had many voice actors that just disappear, or stop replying, or make me wait for months and then tell me they don't want to voice act anymore. It was really difficult, sadly, and I know personally I really disliked that I had to change voice actors so many times. So this means that voice actor-wise, I will be more strict on who gets the role. Meaning people that have voice acting history on YouTube and are active online will have higher odds of getting the role in comparison to people who just started out. I'm really sorry for this, but I do have to take this into account. If you're not voice acting often or frequently, I cannot sadly put my faith in you, because potentially you're not gonna be staying around, or you're gonna be suddenly disappearing on me. Discord will also become a must, meaning if you do not want to be on Discord, getting a role as a voice actor in AzureHowl will not work either. There are probably many more things that I can say, but it could go on forever. I'm sure after this video I'm gonna be like, I should have mentioned this and I should have mentioned that, but it's just, I just can't put it all in one video. The problem, in short, with the current version is that I really lost motivation. Even if I continued, I could have definitely pictured AzureHowl dying one day. As somebody who is demotivated, just cannot keep working on said project. For the future of AzureHowl, I could only see the reboot, and I'm really glad that people accepted that and were all actually excited for it. It's gonna be quite a way, it's gonna take a while, because obviously I have to first start on the designs and everything, then I have to work on the opening and the ending credits and so on. But you can also expect voice auditions then, as some roles will open up. So I hope you found all of this helpful, and I hope that this at least answered some of your questions as well. Now, if you've actually listened to everything of this video, then you deserve a muffin from the muffin button. Muffins! Okay, no, I have to quit drinking that coffee. Yes, Starbucks addiction. Well, have a very nice evening. See you.